I know it would matter to me, and we've interviewed a number of sociologists, religion people, people in the social sciences. There's virtually no debate, although they would be a lot more libertarian in their views toward defining marriage probably. There's no debate that family is the center of civilization in virtually every civilization that has ever existed. And it always tends to center around a mom and a dad. Occasionally you'll have polygamy, but so if we go way down that road, it is, whether you're for it or against it, it's by definition a vast social experiment that has never been tried in the history of people, really. Maybe you'd go back to ancient times where anything was going. But so what would you say, just staccato, are sort of the big picture trends concerning families in the U.S., Virginia, since the 90s, for those people that aren't familiar with them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things going on, and I want to be clear that just because the ideal is the nuclear family, that's not to say we stigmatize children who don't have that advantage, right? So we want to be really upfront to say not everybody gets that experience, but what we're doing right now, this grand social experiment, is that we're saying let's intentionally create places where people are deprived of a mom or a dad. That's very different than scenarios that we find ourselves in naturally. And so that's the challenge that we're in right now. And the trend is not just in that area, but also in the area of cohabitation. And this is very real. People don't realize, so there are so many people now choosing to live together and then maybe even have children, but not make the permanent commitment of marriage, not make that statement of this is for the long haul, this is the commitment. And people might think, oh, this looks fundamentally similar. That's not what the outcomes are saying. Cohabitation, by stats, but not by my opinion, is saying there is more likelihood for conflict, more likelihood for actual physical abuse, less likelihood that this is actually going to end in a permanent relationship, right? So it's more likely to end than marriage. And so for children, that's just not as stable of an environment, really for women or children. This is something that is a trend that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to make it sound like there's a problem with it. But the data is bearing out saying this is not the same as marriage. This is not functionally creating that foundational bedrock that society rests on. And why do we say society rests on it? Because we're going to pay the cost of the fallout of someone not having a stable home environment growing up. We know that. We know that in our prison system. We know that over and over. Welfare, the likelihood someone will end in poverty, will live life in poverty, is greatly affected by whether they experience that ability to have that nuclear family, including that lifetime commitment of marriage. The other thing that's very concerning that connects to this, that is a trend, is that we're now sort of redefining parenting, and that has real impact. So the Virginia legislature this year changed who can become a parent. And they are probably not the only state, but now if you have a legitimate interest in a child, you are open to becoming a parent. Well, how is that different from before? Well, that's not saying I want to adopt a child, like so, a single individual has a child and ends up in a marriage or has someone else, and that person adopts a child, makes that permanent legal commitment to that child. That's not what that's saying. That's always been allowed. What it's saying is we can have the live-in boyfriend, and they can be considered a parent for custody and all sorts of other things down the road, even though we haven't gone through an adoption process. The danger to children that exists in redefining parenthood is astronomical, and we have not yet even begun to experience. And of course, that comes into play in same-sex relationships, but it is not really a problem specific with same-sex relationships. It is this idea that we are not taking commitment seriously, and that is what harms children.